For the safety of listeners at home, following guidelines specified by the MPAA for film as a baseline, the following reading will be rated PG for scenes of fantasy violence and some dark imagery. The text read comes from a slightly earlier version of the novel. As such, wording may be different in certain places compared to the final published text. However, the author has endeavored to make sure that the reading and the novel are as close as possible. The Knight and the Unicorn. Chapter 2. The Unicorn's Meadow. Early the next day, Tristan woke at dawn as he usually did and performed his morning work and chores on the farm. Without telling anyone, he slipped back to the main house mid-morning, grabbed his bag, and put on a strong pair of work boots. He picked up his walking stick and left the house when no one was looking, determined to hit the forest before anyone noticed he was gone. He slipped through one of the untended fields he knew from the previous night's business his family wouldn't be paying attention to. Once he hit the edge of the field, he skirted the outside until the farm was no more than a speck, then tore off as quick as he could across the plains between Elydria and the darker forest to the northeast. He felt bad leaving his mother and father and brothers behind. Tristan was an otherwise dependable farmhand and good with organization, and his not being there would mean a much slower-paced day, even with his father's hired workers helping them out. But the words of the priest had emboldened him, and with the items in his bag, Tristan felt it shouldn't take long to quietly slip out with Rosalind and return back to the village. Determined and eager, Tristan came to the edge of the forest before midday and quickly steeled himself to enter. Skirting the edge of the forest, Tristan found a path that led further inwards that looked like an old but well-worn trail. Here he stopped just outside for a short rest and had a drink of water. He double-checked his bag and made sure he had everything he needed to enter. The bread was still good, his shoes were sturdy and comfortable, his walking stick was at his side, and the pendant from the priest could be found among the bag's contents. Satisfied with the preparations he had made, Tristan collected himself and stepped inside the forest. It was just like any other forest around there at first. Tall birch and oak and spruce trees covered the forest in shade, and the warm sunlight cast speckled shadows on the forest floor. Green bushes and rocks covered the wilder areas off the dirt path that wound through the trees, and occasionally through toppled logs larger around than Tristan was tall. Birds sang, and Tristan could occasionally hear the sound of small creatures wandering around in the undergrowth. Spring was in full bloom, and patches of flowers occasionally created a shock of vibrant color amongst the green and brown and white. Tristan found himself feeling rather comfortable with his journey so far. The woods held nothing to threaten him, and he began to walk with a springy and jaunty step. He began to wonder why these woods were so threatening to the townspeople, and why they all reacted with fear to someone going inside. The road traveled deeper and deeper into the forest, and soon followed a clear running river down into a small valley, before turning away towards the mountains. The woods slowly grew thicker, and the sun shone through in fewer places, enough so that Tristan could see his way, but not much more outside of those areas. The deeper reaches faded away until all Tristan could see of the surrounding woods was dark shadows against faded light. The path also grew smaller, and many roots crossed the path so that Tristan had to occasionally look down to make sure he did not trip over anything. He gripped his walking stick a little firmer, and looked around as though wondering if someone might be watching him. "I can see why the villagers do not like these woods. But this isn't so bad," Tristan said to himself with more bravado than he actually felt. "These woods do not feel so dark as with magic. It is simply wild and untamed. If some of the trees were cut down, the light would shine through as it does back at the entrance, and then it would not be so frightful. But it is quite farther along than I would have expected." Despite his reasoning with himself, Tristan could not shake the idea that he was being watched as he walked along the path. There was a sensation that he needed to keep moving, as though something might catch and attack him if he stopped. The woods now felt still, as though the animals were waiting for something to pass by, and there wasn't even the sound of a bird taking flight to flee. Tristan's pace was slowed by his watching the road and the woods, despite all his quickening to get Rosalind back. Occasionally he mumbled a quick prayer of hope that Rosalind was still alive, just to keep his own spirits up. The thought of Rosalind and the words of the priest kept Tristan going for what seemed like hours as he continued without rest for as long as he could. The woods were dark and cool, but Tristan suddenly felt hot and tired, and he felt like he had been walking for miles. He realized he would need to stop and eat sometime soon, but where he could stop safely he had no idea. He was just about to stop and find a rock to sit on, damned if something was following him, he could defend himself with his walking stick if necessary, when he saw a faint golden light shining ahead. By now the woods felt oppressive, and Tristan was almost feeling claustrophobic from the increasing pressure, and he longed for a bit more sunlight as well as a potential vantage point. The road went up a little bit, and Tristan figured he might be able to get a scope of the valley from the area with the golden light, if it peaked above the forest high enough. At the very least, he thought he might be able to climb a tree to get above the rest of the woods. His resolve restored, Tristan steeled himself and walked forwards along the path, drawn to the golden light. But something told him to be on his guard still, and he moved the cross that the priest had given him from his bag to his pocket, where he might be able to put it on quickly if the need arose. He thought of Rosalind and wondered if she was all right, if it might not be too late. But he quickly pushed those thoughts out from his mind. Rosalind was too strong and too quick-witted to succumb to something like that so quickly, and she would at least put up a good fight once she realized her situation. Perhaps she would resist just long enough until Tristan arrived so that he could get out of there. With that hope in mind, Tristan continued following the road as the golden light shone clearer and clearer, hoping he could find some sign that Rosalind was unharmed. As he approached the golden light, Tristan could swear the forest was becoming brighter in general, and the trees were becoming more spaced out. The woods began to go back to their more mystical yet comparatively more normal appearance when he had first entered them, and once more he could hear bird song. The air became warmer, and Tristan had a feeling of almost lightness and easiness come upon him, as he further approached the golden light. Tristan passed under the boughs of two trees that formed a sort of archway, and found himself in a bright and warm glade, filled with soft green grass and moss-covered rocks. Off to one side flowed a gentle brook with clean water, and trees around the edges held luscious and ripe fruits that looked ready to be picked and eaten. Flowers of all sorts grew and blossomed all over the clearing, creating an enchanting mixture of purple and yellow and red and blue and lilac and white, and all heavy with sweet scent, and the sun shined softly down on the scene with a certain warmth that made Tristan almost feel comfortable. Tristan was stunned to see such a bright and serene-looking glade after the dark and oppressive nature of the forest he had just been through. The priest's words came back to him, however, and Tristan gripped his walking stick tighter in case something was meant to lull him into a false sense of security. Tristan realized the sudden shock of light was strange after the deep of the forest, and the vaguely golden hue it cast felt to him like the sun had not moved since he had entered along the road, despite seeming to have travelled a long way out. But Tristan was not prepared for the shock that awaited him as he walked further into the meadow. In the middle of the place was a fine oak tree that reached high above the other trees, and within its shade was a small hollowed-out area of dirt filled with grass and the heavy scent of flowers. Lying in this hollow was Rosalind, dressed modestly in a deep blue dress with shirt and a white nightgown, looking unharmed but clearly unconscious. Tristan ran over to Rosalind, calling her name and kneeling on the ground next to her. He quickly put his ear to her chest and listened carefully. Yes, she was alive, her heart pumping slowly but steadily in her breast, and Tristan breathed a sigh of relief. But his relief turned quickly to concern once again as he felt the breath coming from her lips was shallow and laboured, not too unlike one who was ill. She was alive, but it was as though she was clinging to life with everything she had. There was a chance, if Tristan got her back fast enough. She is very ill, a gentle voice came to Tristan's ears. I am doing what I can. Tristan perked his head up at the voice that broke the silence. Once again he was alert and fingering the cross in his pocket, tightening his grip on the walking stick. He stood up and looked around the clearing. Who goes there? He shouted. What is going on with her? You have nothing to be afraid of. I wish to help you. Around from the other side of the tree came the strangest and most magnificent creature Tristan had ever laid eyes on. It looked like a magnificent white horse, though its mane and hooves reflected the colours of a vibrant, fiery sunset in the strange light of the glade, the gold becoming golden, pink, and purple, and vibrant orange with even the slightest movement of the beast. From its forehead, just below the start of the mane, protruded a long straight horn that shone like diamond and looked as sharp as a lance. A pair of vibrant violet eyes stared at Tristan, and took in his shock at the creature's appearance. Tristan's shock at the creature was threefold. He had heard tales of creatures that lived within the woods, but was surprised to find a unicorn, reported to be rare if not mythical, as one of the creatures. His second surprise was that it appeared to him out of nowhere, and his third shock came from the fact that it seemed like it was speaking to him. It was unmistakable that it was. There was no one else in the clearing besides them and the unconscious Rosalind. Tristan's grip on the walking stick did not abate. A unicorn, he said. The horse-like head gently nodded once in agreement. Do not be afraid, she said gently. At least it was definitely feminine in sound to Tristan's ears. I am here to help her, and perhaps help you if you are so tied to her. Tristan was no fool. Mythological creatures did not suddenly pop up out of stories and legends to unsuspecting people wandering around in dark forests. There was something uncanny about this whole situation, yet Tristan could not put his finger on exactly what was going on. Who are you, he asked, and why do you tell me not to be afraid? Those who tell others not to be afraid are often trying to place one off their guard. A fair response, the unicorn said, seemingly impressed by Tristan's retort. She gracefully trotted around until she was facing Tristan on the opposite side of Rosalind's sleeping form. My name is Serena, and I am the spirit and guardian of this wood. Unfortunately, this glade is all that remains of what was once pure, and so it is the only place where we are truly safe. Tristan thought back on the stories Rosalind had given to him. The unicorn's status as protector and guardian of the wood was well in accordance with the legends that flitted around the village and the stories ascribed to such creatures. Yet still Tristan remained wary of the beast. Then perhaps you can answer a question of mine, he said, retaining his grip on the pendant in his pocket. Do you know of the enchantress that lies within these woods? Perhaps you are her familiar. Oh, I would never condone such a thing, Serena said, sounding almost hurt and offended, and recoiling a step as though Tristan had threatened her. It is that foul enchantress that has caused this stain upon my pleasant forests. Her power is stronger than mine is, and I can only do so much against her alone. No doubt her familiars do lie in these woods, but they have no power here in my meadow. Tristan released a finger off the pendant and set the walking stick on his side as normal. He still did not like the sudden appearance of this unicorn. There were still a few things he needed to set straight. Yet you know of this enchantress, he said, though his tone was less accusing than before. And surely you know of her tendency to steal young women away from the city outside of these woods. How come we in the nearby towns haven't heard of you? And while my Rosalind is here, where are the other women that have certainly come into these woods because of her? Serena bowed her head sadly. I'm afraid you've come too late for them, and the wager hat is long if you want revenge. She lies on the other side of the mountain with the shrine. That she has not discovered this glade is a miracle unto itself. She motioned with her head. Come into the sunlight. It is warmer, and bright sunlight is better for talking of dark things. Tristan released another finger from the pendant and followed Serena from the shadow of the oak tree into the brighter part of the glade. The unicorn's mane and coat gained a newfound luster that enhanced the soft colours, and caused her to shine with a soft golden colour. She was rather beautiful, and Tristan found himself partially in awe and partially amazed that he was so close to something like her. The enchantress comes to the city at night, the unicorn said somberly to Tristan as they walked around the clearing. No doubt you've heard that much. But when she comes here, she takes them to her house deeper within these woods, so deep that it is difficult if not impossible to escape. There she places her enchantments and curses on them, poisoning them and draining them of life until they become nothing more than husks. They wither and die, their skin is turned to dust, and their bones are all that remains of them. The further you go, the more bones you shall find. The unicorn spoke with an oddly musical tone, one that sounded almost like she was singing every word. The voice thrilled Tristan and caused a shiver to go up and down his spine, but whether it was out of pity or sadness, or even wariness, he did not know. Oh, how many have come through here and died at her hands, the unicorn said, with Tristan getting a vague feeling like she was crying, or close to it. Oh, how many I have let pass by in quiet without being able to reveal my position. I grieve for them all the lives that have been lost. And yet not only for them, but warriors who come through, seeking to rescue them only to never return. For armor alone is not enough to ward her magic away. The unicorn stopped for a moment and looked towards the oak tree, and they both looked at Rosalind sleeping in the small hollow. But she was stronger than the rest, Serena continued quietly. She resisted her the whole way, and fought. She fought off her bindings, fought through the poison that was inflicted on her, but could not make her way out of the forest. By chance she appeared at my fair meadow, and I used what magic I had to get to work on helping her at once, using my own spells to abate the spread of the poison until it weakened but did not destroy her. I thought she may have a chance, and here you are, and now our hope is not lost. I thank you kindly for your help, Tristan said, releasing another finger from the pendant. But I should take her back now. She needs a medic. It does not seem very far from here to the edge of the forest. I thank you for protecting her, but we should be heading back before this enchantress suspects anything. No! The word came almost like a bark from the unicorn's mouth, and was paired with an almost feral snort from the horse-like nose. Tristan found himself reeling backwards and releasing the pendant, though staring at the unicorn in surprise. There was a sudden wildness to her eyes that caused Tristan to remind himself he was still essentially dealing with a wild animal, and for a moment Tristan second-guessed himself in his dealings with this unicorn. Appearing to realize the sudden panic in her voice was uncalled for, Serena continued in a much calmer tone. No, you cannot take her back, she reasoned. The poison is too strong for you to take her back safely alone. You may be able to take her out of the forest if you were lucky, but she would die by the time you manage to get her to a medic without my help. Yet I can't leave her, else my remaining foothold on this forest is lost. She must stay here, where I can keep her safe until another solution presents itself. We are all in danger of the enchantress if we step out from this glade. Tristan was torn. Rosalind's shallow breathing, pale face, and deep sleep-like state told Tristan the unicorn's statement had some truth and she was definitely ill. But to remain in these woods with the enchantress looking about, particularly with escaped prey on the loose, was not exactly a desirable position to be in. Furthermore, it meant Tristan himself was already in more danger than he had suspected himself of being in. Tristan sighed and pulled at his hair with his hands as though trying to tear it out. I can't take Rosalind out of these woods or she dies, he said. I can't go and get a doctor because now I'm in danger. But there must be something we can do. I'm afraid I don't have many ideas myself. But come and rest for a few moments, Serena said, walking back to where Rosalind was lying in the hollow. You have travelled a longer way into these woods than you think, and whatever you do, you will need your strength. The unicorn brought fruits and berries that Tristan recognized as ones commonly collected by the locals from woods farther south and away from the mountain shrine, and he ate them with some of the bread that remained. The unicorn also showed him to the clear stream that ran nearby, and when she had purified it with her magic, he took a drink and found it clear and cool, and found himself energized by the food and drink. When he had finished, he sat down next to Rosalind in the hollow, and the unicorn paced around the oak tree in the sunlight, keeping watch but seemingly still thinking about how to help Tristan and Rosalind. They sat in silence for a few moments, each thinking of something they could do to at least abate Rosalind's predicament enough for her to get treatment. Yet other things soon came to Tristan's mind. It felt strange to be here with this strange creature and with Rosalind. If it weren't for the threat of the enchantress and her poison, Tristan thought it almost would have been a good spot for a picnic. The sun seemed to travel slowly across the sky here, and it filled the clearing with a peaceful warmth that felt rather comfortable and lethargic. The way it was tucked in would have made it a nice, private place to retreat away from the busy town square, and Tristan imagined himself coming here with Rosalind after a particularly hectic day just to relax, if it weren't for the dark woods around them. Tristan found himself feeling warm and sleepy, and decided to close his eyes as he thought of ways to save Rosalind. He leaned back against the oak tree, and 1,000 things raced through his mind as he searched for some glimmer of hope. But when he closed his eyes, he found himself not thinking of ways to save Rosalind, but of a strange vision. He was creeping through the streets of Elindria, apparently searching for something. He passed by his own house, circling it once or twice as though making sure no one was awake, before returning back to the main streets and wandering until he found his way to the baker's house. A frontal entrance was not due, so he left and found an alleyway that went behind the row of houses, and walked until he came to the back gate. With all his might, he kicked the gate until there was a deafening crash and the board splintered. But when he looked at the guard standing nearby, it was as though he hadn't heard a sound. Indeed, he almost seemed to be asleep where he stood. Rosalind was awake in her room. She was surprised by his presence there, but suddenly she came to and started lashing out on him. Tristan quickly realized it wasn't him that was doing these acts, but he was watching the movements of the enchantress on the night she was kidnapped. Rosalind fought admirably against the enchantress for as long as she could. Soon a glittering mist, almost black but with a strange red sheen to it in the moonlight, came up and surrounded Rosalind, and she collapsed over, coughing and trying to scream out for someone to help. But the guard did not hear a sound, and soon Rosalind was picked up and levitated as though by magic, kicking and screaming as much as she could. The enchantress moved away and back down the alley, dragging a slowly weakening Rosalind along as she went. The enchantress ran faster than Tristan knew any human could go on her return trip. Having gained a layout of the town, she took the fastest route back to the main street and away towards the forest. Before she left town, however, she ran off towards Tristan's family farm once again, and stopped, hovering outside his window, as his vision turned to black. "Come to me, Tristan. Come to me." Tristan was startled awake by the recognition of the voice and instinctively grabbed his walking stick, almost prepared to defend himself. He called himself when he realized he was merely back in the meadow under the oak tree and he had just had a dream. Rosalind was still sleeping under the effects of the enchantress's curse, and the unicorn was still pacing around, keeping watch and trying to think. Tristan cursed himself silently for falling asleep when Rosalind was in such danger, and attempted to think about ways to cure her again. Reminded of her plight and now fully awake, Tristan looked over to Rosalind. She looked much the same as she did when he had entered the clearing and first found her, and he checked her breathing and again to find the same hollow breath. But there was strength in there that Tristan now found. A quiet resistance to the poison that caused her to clench onto life with everything she had, just as she resisted the enchantress's kidnapping her, even while subject to her magic. She was strong, no doubt about it. Particularly so if she had made it all the way from the enchantress's dwelling to the unicorn's meadow under the effects of the poison. Tristan smiled down at Rosalind and gently brushed away a bit of hair that had fallen over her forehead. You hang in there, Rosalind, he whispered to her. Stay strong like you always have. I'll find a way to get us both out of this somehow. Rosalind's breathing became deeper for a moment, and Tristan was further encouraged at how she was still hanging in there. Taking a cue from the unicorn offering him some of the clean wild berries and fruits to eat, Tristan tried remembering some wild herbs he had heard from some of the locals as poison treatments. He thought back long ago to his father talking with some other men in the marketplace, or his mother talking with other women while helping with the laundry, or the stories he had heard during festival times, trying to remember what combinations did what, and what were most effective for clearing toxins. He had some images and names in his head, and was trying to sort through them when a soft, clear voice rose throughout the clearing. 3 tasks you must solve to stop this witch's curse. With these 3 items the magic shall disperse. First a blueberry to stop the poison's race, to restore her health and leave behind no trace. Next comes water from a holy mountain spring, to return her mind and help me ease the sting. Last a gold brooch from the ruins in the caves, to help me cleanse her pure heart, a life to save. There was a long moment where Tristan stood stunned looking at Serena, unable to say a word for a long time. For right as he remembered the thing about the herbs and began to sort it out in his mind, she had begun to sing. Once again, Tristan found himself with a shiver up and down his spine. The unicorn's voice was calm and clear and rang throughout the clearing, settling all over until Tristan found himself surrounded by the verse. The clearing grew still, and the forest lay in silence around them, as though everything was listening to the unicorn's singing. Tristan soon found himself also listening with rapt attention, equally in awe and trying to drink in every bit of information he could once he'd gotten figured out what the verse was talking about. The verse filled him and seemed to dispel all other thoughts. And yet it was so beautiful, beautiful and sad as though almost in mourning. It pulled at Tristan's heartstrings as it simultaneously reminded him of both the last desperate hope of the unicorns to protect these woods, and the danger that Rosalind was now in. But amidst the darkness of the forest and the dire predicament they found themselves in, the words brought him hope that there was indeed a chance that remained to save Rosalind. And they brought him courage. You know a way we can bring Rosalind back? He asked, trying to rein in his excitement as he voiced his hope. The way I mentioned in the verse is very difficult, Serena said warily. The 3 items can be found in the woods nearby, but they are all guarded heavily, and getting them will put your life in danger. And I cannot leave here to help you directly due to Rosalind's poison and the enchantress's power. You will be on your own. Nevertheless, a way to fix this has presented itself. I am willing to place myself in danger of the enchantress in case Rosalind can be healed. The unicorn looked at him tenderly. But you are so young, Serena said. Why throw your life away? You might be able to return to the village alone if you are quick enough and stealthy enough. The enchantress is not interested in you, but her. One so young and vibrant as you has many more years ahead of him. I made a promise to her, Tristan said, looking back towards Rosalind. I promised her that I would go to the ends of the earth for her. I do not intend to let her down now. Serena nodded. There is a certain fire in your eyes that I cannot dampen. Your love for her is strong, and perhaps what you need to withstand the dangers ahead. But have you anything to protect yourself with from the enchantress's magic? I have a cross with me, Tristan said. He reached for his pocket. It is supposed to ward off her magic. Serena's nostrils flared. Don't show it to me, the unicorn said hastily, though keeping her dulcet tones. It is good to know you have it at least. And now, have you anything to defend yourself with? Something struck Tristan as vaguely wrong about the unicorn's refusal to see the artifact, but he didn't argue it and moved on. I have my walking stick, Tristan replied, holding it up to show to her. It is not much, but I have worked on a farm my whole life and am very strong. I could pick Rosalind up and carry her for miles with ease, and have been swinging sickles and hoes and plows to till the ground for many years. Strength of arm is good, Serena said, but let me cast a small enchantment of my own on your walking stick, such that it will not break. Her horn glowed a little more, and she tapped the stick with it. The walking stick glowed a little itself before returning to normal, but Tristan could feel it was sturdier than it had been. Tristan examined himself. I have been refreshed by your food and drink. I have my cross to ward off the enchantress's magic, and you have strengthened my walking stick to defend myself with. He faced Serena confidently. I think I am ready. Then let us take these on one at a time, the unicorn said. The first item you are to search for is a dark blue berry to stave off the effects of the poison. I know where this one is. Go back out the way you entered here, and follow the trail going east until you come to a briar patch. Be careful, as the thorns are sharp and will cut you easily, but the berry itself should be distinct and noticeable. All right, Tristan said, nodding his comprehension. What else do I need to know before I go? Bring back 2 sprigs of berries from the bush, Serena said. One we shall mush into a paste and have a drink with water with the help of my magic. The other I shall eat pure, and it will provide a boost to my magic to counteract the poisons and curses until we can get the other items to help heal her. 3 or 4 berries each will be enough. Tristan nodded his understanding and turned to go. Wait, Serena called out. Tristan turned to face the unicorn and raised an eyebrow questioningly. There is one more thing I almost forgot, Serena said, trotting up to him. The enchantress does have a familiar who wanders these woods. I should hope you do not cross them, but if you do, prepare yourself by bringing out the cross you received back home. If the enchantress is vulnerable to it, then certainly it will be as well. Tristan nodded. Thank you so much for your help, he said. Keep Rosalind safe until I come back. And he turned and began to walk back into the dark woods. Go with speed and grace, brave Tristan, he heard Serena say as he left. Here ends Chapter 2. Next week, The Knight and the Unicorn, Chapter 3.